Imagine waking up in a San Francisco brothel. Your vision is melting. The walls are breathing. You're terrified, hallucinating, convinced you're going insane. Here's the catch. You didn't take any drugs. The CIA did that to you. Without your permission. Without your knowledge. And they filmed the whole thing from behind a one-way mirror. This isn't science fiction. This happened to hundreds, maybe thousands of Americans in the 1950s and 60s. The program was called MKUltra, and it may have created one of America's most infamous domestic terrorists. This is the story of how your government dosed its own citizens with LSD, destroyed the evidence, and got away with it. Before we dive into this nightmare, if you're new here, welcome to The Sleeping Psychologist, where I uncover the darkest experiments and biggest government scandals that you definitely slept through in history class. The CIA literally drugged people while you were learning about the Revolutionary War. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. And drop a comment. If the government did this in the 50s and 60s, what do you think they're doing now? Alright, let's get into it. Chapter 1. Cold War Paranoia and the Birth of MKUltra. It's 1953. The Korean War just ended. American POs are coming home, and they're saying things that terrify the US government. They're confessing to war crimes they didn't commit. They're praising communism. Some are refusing to come home at all. Military officials are convinced the Soviets, the Chinese, and the North Koreans have discovered mind control. They must have found some drug or technique that can break a person's will, erase their memories, turn them into puppets. And if they have it, America needs it too. Enter the CIA. On April 13, 1953, CIA Director Allen Dulles authorized Project MKUltra. The goal? Develop mind-controlling drugs to use against Soviet spies. Find a truth serum. Create a Manchurian candidate, an assassin who doesn't know he's an assassin. Learn how to wipe someone's mind clean and reprogram them like a robot. This wasn't a fringe operation. This was an official CIA program with massive funding. Millions of dollars, adjusted for inflation. And leading it was a chemist named Sidney Gottlieb. Gottlieb was brilliant, ruthless, and obsessed. He had a club foot, a stutter, and a singular mission: unlock the secrets of the human mind. He loved growing goats on his farm and dancing folk music. He also loved dosing unsuspecting Americans with LSD to see what would happen. In 1953, Gottlieb bought the entire world's supply of LSD $240,000 worth, which would be over $4 million today. He didn't buy it for medical research. He bought it to weaponize it. Under MKUltra, the CIA didn't just experiment in labs. They went out into the real world. They set up brothels in San Francisco called Operation Midnight Climax, where prostitutes lured men in, dosed their drinks with LSD, and CIA agents watched through one-way mirrors. They dosed mental patients in Kentucky with LSD for 174 consecutive days. They slipped drugs into the drinks of their own CIA colleagues at office parties. They experimented on prisoners, on drug addicts, on people who couldn't fight back, as one CIA officer put it. And they did all of this without consent, without oversight, without consequences. Chapter 2. The Scope minus 149 subprojects, 80 institutions MKUltra wasn't one experiment. It was an umbrella program with 149 subprojects scattered across 80 institutions, 44 universities, 15 pharmaceutical companies, 12 hospitals, 3 prisons. Most of these institutions had no idea they were working for the CIA. Professors thought they were doing legitimate research funded by benign-sounding organizations like the Society for the Investigation of Human Ecology. They didn't know it was a CIA front. The scope was staggering. MKUltra explored LSD, mescaline, heroin, barbiturates, amphetamines, electroshock therapy, sensory deprivation, hypnosis, sexual abuse, and psychological torture. They studied how to use a magician's sleight of hand to slip drugs into someone's drink. They researched K-drugs, knockout agents. They tested whether they could control animals remotely. They even looked into ESP, yes, extrasensory perception. One particularly horrifying subproject took place in Montreal. Dr. Donald Ewan Cameron, former president of the American Psychiatric Association, was paid $69,000 by the CIA to conduct experiments at McGill University's Allen Memorial Institute. Patients came in with anxiety or postpartum depression. They left unable to talk, unable to recognize their parents, incontinent, with their memories completely erased. Cameron's technique was called psychic driving. He'd put patients into drug-induced comas for weeks, sometimes months. While they were unconscious, he'd play tape loops of repetitive phrases or white noise. He administered electroshock therapy at 30 to 40 times the normal power. His goal? Erase the existing personality and reprogram it. He called it depatterning. The CIA loved it. But here's the thing. MKUltra wasn't just happening in Canada or in CI, safe houses. It was happening in America's most prestigious universities: Harvard, Stanford, Cornell. And one of the participants in a Harvard experiment was a 16-year-old math prodigy named Ted Kaczynski. You might know him better as the Unabomber. From 1959 to 1962, Kaczynski participated in a study run by psychologist Henry Murray. Murray had worked for the OSS, the CIA's predecessor, during World War II. His experiment was brutal. Students were asked to write essays about their deepest beliefs and values. Then they were strapped into a chair under blinding lights and verbally attacked. Their philosophies were torn apart. They were humiliated, belittled, subjected to what Murray himself called vehement, sweeping, and personally abusive interrogations. This happened repeatedly over 3 years. Kaczynski was 16 when it started. He had skipped 2 grades, isolated from his peers, emotionally fragile. And for 3 years, Murray broke him down. Was Murray's study part of MKUltra? Officially, no direct evidence links it, but Murray had CIA connections. The CIA, a funded behavior control research at Harvard. And the methods? Identical to MKUltra interrogation techniques. Whether it was officially MKUltra or not, the damage was done. Chapter 3. Inside the experiments: LSD, torture, and murder. Let's talk about what actually happened inside an MKUltra experiment. Picture this. It's 1953. You're in New York City, sitting in a bar. A friendly guy buys you a drink. You chat, you laugh, you finish your drink. 20 minutes later, reality dissolves. You don't know where you are. You don't know who you are. Colors are screaming. Your hands don't feel like hands. You're convinced you're dying. You're not. You're tripping on LSD. And the man who bought you that drink? CIA. This was real life for countless Americans. In Operation Midnight Climax, the CIA rented apartments in San Francisco and New York. But White wasn't the only one running field tests. Sidney Gottlieb believed lab results weren't realistic. He wanted to see how LSD worked in normal settings. So he and his colleagues started dosing each other. Surprise acid trips became an occupational hazard among CIA operatives, according to later testimony. One CIA officer dosed in his morning coffee became psychotic and ran through Washington, D.C., convinced every car held a monster. Then there was Frank Olson. Olson was a 43-year-old biochemist working for the Army at Fort Detrick, Maryland, on biological warfare. In November 1953, he attended a CIA retreat in rural Maryland. After dinner on the second night, his CIA supervisor, Robert Lashbrook, spiked the after-dinner liqueur with LSD. No one told Olson. 20 minutes later, Olson was laughing uncontrollably. Then he became paranoid. He thought people were plotting against him. He wanted to quit his job. His colleagues were alarmed. Lashbrook took Olson to New York City to see a CIA-cleared psychiatrist. On November 28, 1953, at 2:30 a.m., Olson crashed through the closed window of his 13th-floor hotel room and fell to his death. The CIA called it suicide induced by depression from the LSD. Olson's family was told he'd had a fatal accident. They weren't told about the LSD for 22 years. But suicide? Olson's family didn't buy it. In 1994, they had his body exhumed. The forensic pathologist found evidence Olson had been struck on the head before going out the window. His family believes he was murdered. Why? Because Olson had doubts. He'd witnessed CIA interrogations in Europe that involved torture and biological agents. He told colleagues he wanted out, and the CIA couldn't risk him talking. Meanwhile, at Harvard, Ted Kaczynski was enduring his own psychological torture. For 3 years, he returned to Murray's lab. Each time, he was ambushed with attacks on his core beliefs. Murray's assistant later described the sessions as designed to create high stress. Kaczynski later told his lawyer the experiments left him feeling intense anger. Years later, in his manifesto, Kaczynski would write obsessively about the dangers of psychological manipulation and technology, themes eerily similar to what he experienced at Harvard. Chapter 4. The Cover-Up, Destroying the Evidence. Here's where it gets even darker. MKUltra wasn't just unethical, it was illegal. The Nuremberg Code, established after World War II, explicitly required informed consent for human experiments. The U.S. had signed it. The CIA ignored it. They justified it by calling it national security. But national security wasn't the only motive. Some historians, like Alfred McCoy, argue that MKUltra's real purpose wasn't mind control at all. It was torture. The CIA wanted scientifically backed interrogation techniques. How do you break someone? How do you make them talk? The LSD experiments, the sensory deprivation, the electroshock, it was all research into torture. And it gets worse. Most of the experiments were scientifically useless. CIA agents running the tests weren't trained researchers. They couldn't maintain controlled conditions. They rarely followed up with subjects. One CIA officer later admitted the experiments made little scientific sense. So why continue? Because they could. In 1973, as the Watergate scandal exploded and government secrets were spilling everywhere, CIA Director Richard Helms made a decision. He ordered all MKUltra files destroyed. Most were shredded. The CIA's official explanation? The program was over, the files were old, and storage space was limited. But the timing was suspicious. Helms gave the order just before retiring. It was a cover-up. Without the files, there'd be no evidence, no accountability. But Helms made a mistake. One cache of documents, about 20,000 pages, survived. They were financial records, misfiled in a budget office. They weren't discovered until 1977, when a journalist named John Marks filed a Freedom of Information Act request. Those documents revealed the true scope of MKUltra. 80 institutions, 149 subprojects, thousands of victims. In 1975, the Church Committee Senate investigation into intelligence abuses held hearings. Senators were horrified. The American public was horrified. But accountability? Almost none. No one went to jail. Sidney Gottlieb retired quietly to his farm. Richard Helms faced no charges for destroying evidence. The institutions involved, universities, hospitals, pharmaceutical companies, claimed they didn't know. Some victims sued and received settlements. Most never knew they'd been experimented on. And Ted Kaczynski? In 1978, he began mailing bombs to universities and airlines. Over 17 years, he killed 3 people and injured 23. His targets: academics, scientists, people advancing technology. His manifesto railed against psychological manipulation and the dangers of a technocratic society. Journalist Alston Chase later argued that Harvard's experiment shaped Kaczynski's anger and legitimized his wrath. Others disagree, pointing to Kaczynski's possible schizophrenia. We'll never know for sure. But one thing is clear. A 16-year-old boy entered Harvard, was subjected to years of psychological abuse, and left with a hatred of modern society that turned him into a terrorist. Chapter 5. The Aftermath. What happened to the victims? So what happened to everyone involved? Frank Olson's family fought for decades for the truth. In 1975, when MKUltra was revealed, President Gerald Ford personally apologized to Olson's widow and children. Congress awarded them $750,000 in compensation, but it wasn't enough. Olson's son, Eric, spent his life investigating. He became convinced his father was murdered, not because of the LSD, but because he knew too much about CIA torture programs. In 1996, the Manhattan District Attorney opened a homicide investigation. It remains officially undetermined. No one was ever charged. Sidney Gottlieb? He lived to age 80, dying in 1999. He spent his retirement folk dancing and tending his goat farm. In 1977, when called before Congress, he expressed no remorse. He dismissed MKUltra as useless. That's it, useless, not immoral, not illegal, just useless. Ted Kaczynski was arrested in 1996 after his brother recognized his writing in the manifesto. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. He died in June 2023 at age 81 in a federal prison medical facility. He never expressed remorse for his victims. He believed he was fighting against a system that destroyed individuality. Whether Harvard's experiment made him a killer is still debated, but it's undeniable that something broke inside that 16-year-old boy. What about the institutions? Most denied knowledge. Harvard has never officially acknowledged the ethical problems with Murray's study. Stanford, McGill, and others settled lawsuits quietly. The universities argued their researchers were deceived by CIA front organizations. Some were, some weren't. The truth is murky. In Canada, victims of Dr. Cameron's experiments sued the CIA in the 1980s. The Canadian government eventually paid settlements. The CIA paid 9 victims $750,000 to split. Cameron himself died in 1967, never facing charges. His techniques, ironically, are now recognized as foundational to modern torture methods. And the victims? Most never knew they were part of MKUltra. Some suffered lifelong psychological damage. Some became addicts. Some took their own lives. Because the records were destroyed, we'll never know how many people were experimented on. Estimates range from hundreds to thousands. The CIA admits to at least 149 subprojects. Each subproject involved multiple subjects. Do the math. It's staggering. In 1977, Senate hearings forced some accountability. The CIA promised reforms. The agency established internal oversight. New rules required informed consent, but damage was done. And trust? Destroyed. How do you trust a government that drugged its own citizens? Chapter 6. Why MKUltra still matters today. Why does MKUltra still matter today? Because it proved the government can and will experiment on its own people if left unchecked. MKUltra violated every ethical standard. The Nuremberg Code, the Constitution, basic human decency. And for 20 years, no one stopped it. Why? Because it was secret. Because there was no oversight. Because national security became an excuse for anything. MKUltra also laid the groundwork for modern torture techniques. The CIA's enhanced interrogation methods used after 9/11's waterboarding, stress positions, sensory deprivation have roots in MKUltra research. Psychologist James Mitchell who designed the post 9/11 program, studied the same behavioral modification research that MKUltra explored. It also exposed the dark side of academic research funding. Universities and hospitals participated some wittingly, some not, in illegal experiments. It raises a question we still grapple with today. What's the responsibility of institutions when government funding comes with hidden agendas? How do we protect academic integrity while accepting federal money? MKUltra also shows the danger of destroyed evidence. Richard Helms shredded the files in 1973. If that one misfiled box of financial records hadn't survived, we'd never know the full scope. It's a reminder, transparency isn't optional in a democracy. Secrecy enables abuse, always. Today, human experimentation is regulated. The Belmont Report, established in 1979, partly because of MKUltra, requires informed consent, risk assessment, and ethical review boards. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Those protections only work if we enforce them. MKUltra happened because secrecy allowed it, oversight failed, accountability failed. And let's be honest, how much do we still not know? MKUltra was only discovered because one box of documents survived. What else is out there, still classified? What programs are running right now that we won't know about for another 50 years? It's a question that keeps conspiracy theorists up at night. But after MKUltra, can you blame them? Project MKUltra is a horror story, but it's not fiction. It's history. Between 1953 and 1973, the CIA dosed hundreds, maybe thousands of Americans with LSD and other drugs without their consent. They set up brothels to film people tripping. They tortured mental patients. They may have murdered one of their own scientists. And when they were about to get caught, they destroyed the evidence. A 16-year-old boy named Ted Kaczynski walked into Harvard and was subjected to 3 years of psychological abuse in an experiment with eerie similarities to MKUltra. Years later, he became the Unabomber, killing 3 people and terrorizing the nation. We'll never know if that experiment created a killer, but we know it broke something inside him. No one went to prison for MKUltra. The victims were never fully identified. The universities involved got away with it. The only reason we know anything is because one bureaucrat misfiled some budget documents in 1970. Think about that. One misfiling away from total secrecy. So yeah, this happened. Your government did this, and they got away with it. Next time someone tells you to trust the government, maybe think twice. Because MKUltra wasn't a conspiracy theory. It was a conspiracy fact. If this story disturbed you, good. It should. Hit that subscribe button for more stories you slept through in history class. The Sleeping Psychologist uploads every week. And drop a comment. What other secret government programs do you think we still don't know about? Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.